Hello YouTube, vinyl community, Wes here checking back in with a brand new episode of The Vinyl Survivor. This is where I take 10 albums from my inbox, give them a serious listen, give them a deep dive, let you know what I thought of each one, and let you know whether they're going to be staying in my permanent collection or whether they just weren't from me. So let's go ahead and get into this. 10 great albums here, or 10 potentially great albums anyway. First album we have to talk about today is the 2014 album by the group Tycho titled Awake. Tycho, if you're not familiar with, they're sort of a very ambient electronic group. Really cool, dreamy, spacey kind of electronic music. Really enjoyable, really modern sounding, and yeah, definitely something that's right up my alley. And this was a really big hit for them. A lot of these songs you'll probably recognize. Heard them played in stores and on the radio and all that stuff. So a really good album. Really nice sort of aesthetic on this. The artwork is really killer. Fits the music really well. And we do get an inner sleeve here. And then just a nice single black vinyl LP, pressed at GZ vinyl. So yeah, I mean, Tycho Awake, as I said, it's ambient, electronic, instrumental kind of stuff. Really cool, really enjoyable, and definitely up my alley. So this one definitely gets a thumbs up for me, and it's staying in my collection. All right, next one I have to talk about is a 12-inch single from Janet Jackson for her song Nasty, one of her most well-known songs from 1986. Yeah, a good song, an enjoyable track. There's an instrumental, an a cappella, and extended version of the song on here on this 12-inch single. So no remixes to speak of. So with that being said, I do like Janet Jackson. I like this song, but I don't see any real reason to keep this 12-inch. So this one is not going to be staying with me. There's the A&M Records label. So yeah, the 12-inch single for Janet Jackson's Nasty. I enjoyed hearing it. It was fun to spin this, but it's not necessarily something I need to keep or something I want to revisit. So this one is not staying. Okay, the next one we have to share, or the next one I have to share with you is another, I guess what I could call a 12-inch single. It's a split 12-inch single by the artist Woodkid and Nils Frahm for the soundtrack to a short film called Ellis, directed by JR. It's a short film about Ellis Island. I have not seen the movie, but I bought this basically because Nils Frahm had a piece on here. He does Winter Morning 2, and then the other artist Woodkid does Winter Morning 1. Both again very ambient, very soundtracky, multi-instrumentalist kind of, soundtracky kind of music. Good music. Bought this mainly because of my interest in Nils Frahm. I will go ahead and show you more of this. This does come with a nice thick booklet. It's kind of crazy that it's a 12-inch single. It comes with all this extra stuff. Comes with this unframed Ellis Island. So just some photographs, photographic art done, for actual windows from Ellis Island with pictures of the people that went through there or were there. Photos of the walls, people sort of on there. An art project, I guess, that was done as part of the film, maybe. As I said, I hadn't seen the film, so I'm not real familiar with this, but ambient electronic soundtracky kind of pieces. And just one track on each side. It's basically a 12-inch single. They're longer tracks, but they're not, they're definitely not full length. This is not a full length LP. This is just sort of two tracks from the movie. So yeah, with that being said, even though I love Nils Frahm and I like collecting his stuff, I don't think I'm going to be keeping this. I'm going to go ahead and just put it in the Discogs store and list it. I'm not going to let it go for cheap, but I'll let it go if somebody wants it bad enough, kind of thing. So yeah, that's Nils Fromm and Woodkid with their music for the short film Ellis. Enjoyable, but not something I necessarily need to keep. Again, nothing that I think I want to revisit anytime. And if you know, I bought this for Nils Fromm, and if I'm going to pull something from the shelves to listen to Nils Fromm, it's not going to be this. So yeah, unless you have some special connection to this movie, or you just absolutely have to have everything one of these artists did, then there's, in my opinion, there's no need to have this. All right, next thing I have to share with you today is the 1988 album by Amy Grant titled Lead Me On. I think this album was Amy Grant trying to do a bit more of a mainstream kind of album, but it sort of suffers from being a very generic 80s pop album without being up there with, like, you know, your Madonna, your Janet Jackson, big name female pop stars. It really doesn't hold up to those, so it was okay, but not great. A nice listen, but not something I would ever want to revisit or keep. Insert with some lyrics on it. This does have that black A&M label. I do like this label a lot. It's always neat to see albums on that label, that version of the A&M label. Definitely nicer than the one that the Janet Jackson was on there. So yeah, that's Amy Grant's "Lead Me On" from 1988. It was a nice listen, but again, not something I would ever see myself revisiting. So that one is not going to be staying. All right, next one is a classic early album by the band Pink Floyd. This is A Saucer Full of Secrets. This is the modern reissue of the album. June 1968. This is reissued in 2016 when they did the Pink Floyd reissue series. Really nicely done. Yeah, I think this has the title track, Saucer Full of Secrets, and Set the Control for the Heart of the Sun. Sort of starting when Pink Floyd is starting to change a bit, getting to more spacier kind of sounding stuff. A pretty strong period for them. They were definitely doing some good work here. Nice, really nice mastering and pressing on these, remastered by Bernie Grundman and pressed at RTI, or at least played it at RTI, I should say. Should correct myself. But yeah, really nicely done. If you're into Pink Floyd, there's no reason not to get these reissues of the early albums, because they're really nicely done, I think. So yeah, that's Pink Floyd's A Saucer Full of Secrets. Definitely a keeper for me. Definitely an enjoyable album. Yeah, just for the early stuff, and to hear them sort of changing their style and moving away from that very early sound that they had that was a little more raucous, a little more raw, and moving into more of that bigger, more defined sound that they would later have. So that's Pink Floyd's A Saucer Full of Secrets. Definitely a thumbs up for me and staying in my collection. All right, next thing I have to share with you is the 1982 album by the Canadian rock group Rush titled Signals. Yeah, excellent album from Rush. They got a lot more synthy on this one. This is the follow-up to Moving Pictures. A really good, really strong follow-up. This has New World Man on it and the Analog Kid. Side 2 opens with this track called The Weapon that I hadn't heard before. I really like that song. That was my favorite track on this album. Yeah, a great Rush album. Definitely one to have if you want to get into Rush. Yeah, definitely. As I said, they're embracing that sort of 80s synthy sound, but it's still it's Rush in your face, as they always are. Some nice photos and liner notes on there, and some lyrics as well. If you're into lyrics, Rush do get kind of very serious in their lyrics, and they did have a nice custom label. Signals by Rush, a classic of theirs. As I said, the follow-up to Moving Pictures, but a great sort of embracing the 80s sort of synthy sort of feeling, and yeah, really good album, and I really definitely enjoyed this one. So that's definitely a keeper for me and staying in my collection. Okay, this next one was a blind buy for me from Goodwill. Finally got around to listening to this. This is Daydreams by Ron Cooley. So yeah, I wrote down this somewhere between fusion jazz and 70s game show music. So take that for what you will. That was my impression of this when I listened to it. Some of the synthesizer work on here is kind of interesting, but overall I found this album to be pretty boring to me. Just the blending of the jazz and the very bleepy bloopy kind of game showy kind of sound just didn't really do it for me. So yeah, that one was kind of disappointing. It's on the American Gramophone label. Daydreams by Ron Cooley. It wasn't for me. I didn't vibe with this one, unfortunately. Had high hopes for it. Thought it was going to be an interesting sort of 80s synth piece, but yeah, I guess I didn't say this is from 1980. So it's maybe a little too early or a little too late, depending on your feeling. But yeah, I didn't like this one. So that one is going to be going away. All right, next up we have the self-titled debut from the hip-hop group The Fat Boys, a classic here. This one was actually a VCLT from Chris Brzezinski, I believe. Yeah, it's The Fat Boys. You got Jailhouse Rap on here, Stick 'em, Can You Feel It, Human Beatbox. Just classic tracks on here. If you're into 80s hip-hop, I mean, this is something you got to have this. And this sort of completed my Fat Boys collection. I had all the other studio albums on vinyl, but I did not have this debut, and so I appreciate getting this as VCLT. And it was nice to finally sit down and give it a serious listen. And it's on the Sutra label. So yeah, this just harkens back to a different time in hip hop, and right around the time, this is probably a little bit, this is a couple years before I really got into hip hop, but just a fun time, and it was definitely a different period, and the early days of hip hop were great. So definitely glad to have this in the collection, and definitely enjoyed listening to it and hearing all these tracks and hearing the album as a whole by itself. So yeah, that's definitely a keeper for me. Fat Boys' self-titled debut from 1984. All right, next thing I have to share with you is a double LP live album. This is Blue Oyster Cult with On Your Feet, On Your Knees. What is the year on this one? 1975. So yeah, this is kind of early Blue Oyster Cult. You don't get Don't Fear the Reaper on here or anything like that. This does have Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll. I had high hopes for this. I am a Blue Oyster Cult fan. Not a huge fan, but I enjoy Blue Oyster Cult, and here's a nice gatefold on this. Unfortunately, the recording on this, I found it was just a little too much audience noise. It was kind of just, it sounded kind of thin and very echoey, and I didn't care for the audio on this one. So unfortunately, while I enjoyed hearing them play live, this is not a live album I would actually go to and listen to again, I don't think. So for that reason, I'm not going to be keeping it. It does have some pretty cool concert photos on the inner sleeves. And they did do a custom label on here, so you don't just get that boring Columbia red and orange label. So yeah, Blue Oyster Cult, On Your Feet, On Your Knees. As I said, it was neat to hear them live, but I just didn't like the recording of this. It's just too much audio noise and too thin sounding. Just doesn't have that punch that you really want with a good live recording. So yeah, unfortunately, this one's not a keeper for me. So that one didn't make it. All right, and lastly, we started off with an modern ambient electronic artist, and we'll finish with one. This is Etal Tech with his album Hollowed from 2016 is the year on this one. Again, this one is a little more aggressive than, say, a Tycho. It's definitely a lot more bass heavy, almost getting into like a... even though this is kind of a bad name, dubsteppy kind of realm, but it's not it's not dubstep. It's very bassy and very punchy and very kind of a little more aggressive, but really cool electronic music. I definitely recommend checking out Etal Tech if you can. An artist I really do like a lot. And this was the album I sort of introduced myself to him with. I think maybe I heard this on All Songs Considered. This is a 2 LP set, black vinyl. So that's Etal Tech, again, modern ambient electronic music, very bass heavy, very rhythmic. It gets you sort of hyped up, I guess you could say, very kind of aggressive in that way without being scratchy and screechy and screamy. Yeah, I just dig it. So that's going to finish up this episode. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day, great night, whenever it is you're watching. Remember, there is no bad music, only music you don't like. See you again next time. Cheers.